When you're self-hosting applications that are publicly available, it's important to not only have good security on your server, but also to have good monitoring to understand what's happening. And part of a good monitoring strategy is to get push notifications about what is happening in your Docker containers. So if someone tries to log into your Bitwarden app, your image application, your Nextcloud, your OpenCloud, whatever it may be, you should get notified, and it's not that hard to set up. So we're going to be using Ntfy in this tutorial, which is a push notification service, and we're going to combine that with a self-hosted app called LoggiFly, which is basically just a Docker log monitor that just easily gets set up with your Ntfy server, and that way you can be monitoring your Docker logs for important log information and instantly get notifications on your phone. So let's get it set up. Okay, I do have a blog post on getting all this set up, so link in the description if you want to follow the blog post. But basically, we're going to be setting up Ntfy, making sure that that's working the way we want. I already have a Cloudflare Tunnel set up from my Cloudflare tutorial. If you don't know how to set up a Cloudflare Tunnel to publicly access your services, make sure to find the link in the description or in the corner of the screen and get your Cloudflare Tunnel set up if that's how you want to access your applications. So we're going to start with Ntfy. Let's go ahead and get this set up. So I'm going to find the instructions for installing Ntfy with Docker, and that's going to take me to this link right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the Docker Compose file and copy this. I'm going to change the bind mount volumes to be local to that Docker folder so that we're not mixing that up with our actual server files. So let's go ahead and copy this. And then I have VS Code open here as my SSH client. So I'm viewing all of the Docker applications, the folders I've created inside of my Docker folder, which is in my user folder. And this is where I house my Docker Compose files. So I'm going to create a new one and call it Ntfy. And then I'm going to create a file in here called Docker Compose .yaml, and we're going to paste that in there. Now, the first thing I want to do is go and change these bind mounts. So I'm just going to create a cache folder. That's fine with me. And then this, I'm going to call this config. So that's going to be my config folder. And I'll change my time zone. So change that to America, Denver. And I'm going to go ahead and comment out the user. And I know a lot of people don't like running containers as root, but for simplicity, just going to comment this out and run this container as root. Let's change the port that this is actually going to run on. So choose whatever port you like that you haven't used. I'll use port 2211. You can bind this to the local host if you would like. And depending on how I set up LoggiFly, I might just want that port to be accessible directly from the IP. So let's just keep that at 2211 right now. Go ahead and save this. Now, before we run that, there are different ways to set up configuration for Ntfy. And the way I'm going to go about it is using a YAML config file. So that's all kind of explained here in the configuration settings. So you can do a whole bunch in Docker Compose, but I will try to be doing as much as I can with the server.yml file. So what we're going to do is create a config folder and create the server YML. Come in here, config, and create a server.yaml. And then we're going to use basically the default server.yaml file from the official GitHub repository for Ntfy. So I'll try to put this in the link in the description. It's there in my blog post as well. Let's go ahead and copy this and paste that. So here is, pretty much all the configuration that you could have for your Ntfy server. Go ahead and save this. And before we get Ntfy up and running, I just want to talk about user access, because by default, Ntfy is pretty public, and basically who can create a new subscription and who can subscribe to that subscription. So I want this to just be my own private notification services. I'm not sending out notifications to other people who are connected to my Ntfy server. I want this to just be for me because I want to be notified about sensitive information about my own Docker containers. So to do this, we do need to basically have a user database created, and I'm going to enable the default access to deny all. So let's look for that auth file. I'm going to search for this. Okay, so I'll just leave these. You can uncomment this auth file, but I'm just going to paste in what I want to do here. So I'm basically saying that I want it to use this SQLite database to track users. So user.database. And then the default access, I want it to be deny all. And so in order for this database to be persisted, I want to create another bind mount for that database. So we're going to bind mount the var lib notify directory. And the only thing that really is going in there is that database file. So that's just going to look like this. We're going to bind mount that directory. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it DB because I know that it's going to house the SQLite database. You can call it users maybe if you want, but I'll just call it DB. Okay, let's save all of that. Okay, so this basically means that no one but authenticated users can subscribe to a topic. And then we're going to start it up and then create an admin user for ourselves that has access to all of the topics. Okay, so let's go ahead and try bringing up Ntfy. cd into my Ntfy directory and do a sudo docker pose up D. And the only thing I didn't really mention that I probably should have is the base URL setting. So this setting is just out of curiosity. Let's see if we can access it. And it says notifications not supported. Notifications are only supported over HTTPS. That's a limitation of the notifications API. So I think we do want to make sure that we are using the base URL and our own DNS server and reverse proxy. Now, let's just really quickly talk about DNS and HTTPS, because you're probably wondering, well, can I do this without my own DNS server? Can I do this without my own reverse proxy? I already have Cloudflare. Yes, but we're going to have more flexibility if we do have our own DNS server and our own reverse proxy, because one, any of our own internal services, such as LoggiFly, that wants to communicate to Ntfy, well, we don't necessarily want that to go all the way through Cloudflare. And if we set up some kind of security protocol, like using mTLS, then that's going to overcomplicate it, really. We just want LoggiFly to go directly to our DNS server, go directly to our reverse proxy with HTTPS, and we are good to go. So let's go ahead and set that up. I have a full Nginx Proxy Manager and Cloudflare Tunnel tutorial. So if you don't already have this set up, go watch that video and then come back here. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into my own DNS server here, and I'm going to do a rewrite. I'm going to add a DNS rewrite here. Well, I actually already have a wildcard rewrite for any domain, subdomain of thomaswildtech.com to go to my server. So that's great, but I do need a reverse proxy configuration. So let's hop into Nginx Proxy Manager and log in. Okay, and from my previous Cloudflare Tunnel tutorial, I already have some domains here. Let's create one for Ntfy, and it's going to look pretty much the exact same as these other ones. So come in, we'll do notify.thomaswildtech.com. We're routing this to localhost 2211. Go ahead and allow WebSocket support here. So let's choose an SSL certificate with the wildcard. So I created that in that last video. Don't know how to do this, watch that video. Select all of these, and then we should be good to go. So let's see if this domain works. Okay, and then now I don't see, now I'm using the URL with HTTPS. Of course, this is only locally available. We can grant notifications here. And let's just go and see if I'm allowed to create a notification. Let's go publish notification, topic, just call it test, hello, and hit send. And you see we get a forbidden error because we limited it to admin only essentially. So let's go ahead and create that admin user. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a shell inside of our Ntfy Docker container. Do a sudo here. And then now I'm in a shell. And then we're going to basically add a user here. So I'm going to call this Thomas with the role of admin, give it a password. So I'll give it Thomas Wild Tech. Okay, user added with role admin. So that went into that SQLite database, which is persisted. And then I'm going to also create an access token for this user because we're going to use that for interacting with the Ntfy API. So just a quick tidbit about access tokens. They do grant full access to the user account. So with that said, just consider the implications of that. If you want to be, granular, what you could do is create a separate user with a specific role for example, only being able to publish, not to be able to read. That's a good idea. For simplicity in this tutorial, I'm just going to create an access token for my admin user, which has read and write access. So let's do a Ntfy token add and then Thomas. Okay, and we have our token here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Okay, paste that somewhere safe, Notepad. All right, let me exit out of my shell. Let's go and see if I can create a test topic here. When I subscribe to a topic, Ntfy does suggest that you have kind of a unique ID with that, just so that the topic can't really be guessed. Which is more important if this is, public facing, which we're going to make public facing. So let's go ahead and do that and hit subscribe. And you can see it says by default, the topic is password protected. So we need to enter in our credentials that we just created in order to actually create this topic that we can subscribe to. Okay, so we just created that topic. Now I can actually send a push notification to that topic. So say, hello world, and then boom, look, I just got a notification from my Google Chrome browser of that topic. So I think what I want to go ahead and do is make sure I have a Cloudflare tunnel or just some public access that is routing the domain to my server. I'm going to be doing this with Cloudflare Tunnel because it's just very easy to do, because I want to go ahead and start getting notifications on my phone. Okay, so let's get this domain. We're going to want to use that domain. Okay, I'm going to be using Cloudflare to use Cloudflare Tunnel. You can just however you want, but Cloudflare Tunnel is very easy to set up. I have a full tutorial on how to do this, how to set up your own tunnel, so I'm not going to go over that. But I'm going to go to the Zero Trust portal. This is where you set up your tunnel. Then I'm going to go to Networks and then Tunnels. I already have a tunnel set up and running. So this is going into my VirtualBox demo. I'm going to go to Configure and then Public Host Names. You can see I already have the paperless Nextcloud paperless API. And then we need to add our Ntfy server. So the subdomain is Ntfy. I'm going to choose Thomas Wild Tech, and then I'm going to route this to my Nginx Proxy Manager instance, which is then going to route it to the actual Ntfy application. So that is the local IP address of my server, and then 443. That's going to be handled by Nginx Proxy Manager. And when you're doing this, when you're communicating HTTPS from the Cloudflare proxy to your own proxy, we do need to tell it what the origin server name is. So that is our domain that we are handling on the Nginx side. So we're going to paste that in there. And similarly, so that's because we already have the TLS certificate in Nginx Proxy Manager, but we do want to also set the HTTP host header, make sure that it is known that that is the host name that should be expected. So go ahead and save that. Okay, and I do want it to be known that I'm using a VPN that is going through Poland right now. So just to know that I'm not using my local DNS server on my phone. And that means that I will be going through Cloudflare Tunnel So let's go to notify.thomaswildtech.com. I just want to establish the fact that the domain is working to the World Wide Web right now, and you can see that indeed it is. Now, normally I'm not going to be using the web browser to get push notifications, right? I need to get the actual app. So let's go to the Play Store, go and search for Ntfy, and let's install this. 4.8 stars. Pretty good. People really like this service because it does just work and it's really effective. Okay, we're going to open it and let's see if we can subscribe to that topic that we created. So hit plus. Now again, the reason why we have this unique ID is because just by default, the topics are publicly accessible, so it just kind of obscures your topics, but that's one reason why we made this deny all by default. You have to be an authorized user. Let's use another server, so notify.thomaswildtech.com. Okay, and hit subscribe. So I have to log in order to subscribe to this topic. Those were the authentication settings we created. Okay, Thomas Wild Tech, log in, and look at that. We can see our hello world notification right there, listening for incoming notifications. So if I'm looking at my phone, let's just go ahead and send ourselves another notification. So let's go hello world 2. Okay, and we got a notification received, hello world 2. We can see that right there. And you can see in the app, it says battery optimization should be off for this app to avoid notification delivery issues. Let's go ahead and fix that. So go to Notify. We do not want it to optimize battery usage. And then let's go to Enable Now for WebSockets. Now in the app itself, we might want to change the default server so that we don't have to change the server each time we set up a new notification service. Go to https://notify.com. Okay, guys, so we know that notifications are working, but just Notify by itself isn't going to do a whole lot. That's where LoggiFly comes in handy because it's automatically going to monitor our Docker containers, or the ones that we want to monitor, and then send us notifications. So in my blog post, I have the link here to get LoggiFly set up. And of course, we're going to deploy this with Docker Compose. So let's scroll down to the Docker Compose file. The other thing that we're going to do is create this config directory and add our config.yaml file. And this is where we're going to specify what containers we want to listen to and what keywords we're going to be looking for in the logs of those containers. So let's go ahead and get our Docker Compose file. Okay, and I'm going to create a folder, not in Notify. I'm going to create a folder out here for LoggiFly. And then let's create a Docker compose.yaml and paste that in there. Oh, okay. And then I'm going to use the Docker socket access compose file. Now, a lot of people will prefer using a socket proxy so that you're not giving a container full access to your actual Docker socket. But we're just going to stick with simple measures here and use the Docker socket access. So let's copy that Docker compose file, and we're going to paste that in here. Let's change the time zone. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and change my config bind mount to just be config. Don't really need the double directory there. Give it the Docker sock. And then again, just to prevent permission issues, I'm going to comment out the user in read only. You can keep those in there as long as you just get the permissions right on the folders that are bind mounted. Okay, and then for the config file, let's look at the config example file here. Okay, for the config file, basically if we mount it, which we are, it says that a template file will be downloaded into that directory. So we can go ahead and look at what that template looks like. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and create this config file myself. So let's give that a copy, and we're going to create our config folder, and then inside of there, we're creating our config.yaml, and want it with the YAML, and we can paste that whole config file in here. Now there's a whole bunch of settings. For now, what I'm going to do is just comment out all of these settings. Don't need them right now. Okay, and then we are going to use the Notify service and we're not going to use the app rise. So I'm going to comment that out. And then obviously what we need to do is there's a couple things here. So we specify what containers we want to listen to. Let's go ahead and get rid of everything except for container 2. I guess each of these shows us a bunch of different examples of what you can do. For now, let's just go ahead and comment out everything except for container 1. We can use that as a reference. And then the notifications. So this is kind of where having your own DNS and reverse proxy comes in handy, because these will just go directly to our Ntfy server. So we can do HTTPS ntfy.thomaswaldtech.com. Topic is LoggiFly or whatever we want. And then we can use that token, okay? So we actually don't really want to use a username and password. I'll just go ahead and comment everything out here because we just need topic and token. So we do need to create a topic inside of Ntfy. So let's go to our Ntfy server and go to subscribe to a topic. So I'm going to hit generate name. So we got this huge code here, and then I'm going to prefix it with LoggiFly. So you just have, a long, unique name. Just improves security, especially if it's public. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste it and hit subscribe. Okay, so we have that topic. Now we need to put the topic here, which is that full name. And then I'm going to put in the authentication token that we created earlier. So that is this guy. So again, if you wanted to have a user with only write access to a topic, you could do that. Make sure that the access control list prevents that user from accessing any of the other topics. That's a really great approach. Paste that at the token here. Okay, now we need to kind of jump into our application logs to see what do we want to track. When there's a successful login, when there's an unsuccessful login, do we need to change the logging level of those applications? I'm going to go ahead and install Portainer real quick because it's just going to be a lot easier to jump between different logs. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. Let's create a folder for Portainer. We're going to create a Docker compose.yml. They do a Google search for Portainer Docker, installing Portainer Community Edition. Pretty easy. You have this Docker run command. Okay, let's copy that. Go into ittools.tech because we want this to be Docker compose. Just Docker run to Docker compose converter. I like using this tool. Paste that in there. And we have our compose file. So let's get that guy and paste that in there. This is going to be our HTTPS. So they already provide a cert for you, which is pretty nice. Let's go ahead and just comment out the HTTP. And then I'll go ahead and just bind mount the Portainer data folder right there. Save that guy. Let's cd into Portainer and do a sudo docker compose upd and let Portainer pull. Now that that's pulled, we can access on 9443. Okay, and you'll get the certificate warning. Go ahead and proceed. Create an admin account. Just go get started, local environment. We have 9 different stacks. So let's look at image. Typically for like a bad authentication attempt, we're probably going to see that in the server application, but we can look at the logs of the Postgres container too. Actually, we'll just look at all of the logs, okay? So we know that image is up and running. The database is sitting there waiting for connections. Redis is sitting here, and the background worker is sitting here. So let's go into our image server. Just go directly here. And I'm already logged in. We do see a WebSocket connect here, which is fine. Let's just see what happens if I upload a picture. Okay, let's upload this snowboard picture. Check our logs here. So not a whole lot. Detected 1 new face. That's great. But the WebSocket Connect, that might be an indicator of like a new sign-in. So we could do a notification for that. We don't see anything else really in these other logs. But let's see what happens if we try to sign in incorrectly. Okay, let's use the wrong password. Incorrect email password. And then like we get a failed login attempt for user. So that's pretty nice little log message there. So we can really use that. So let's go ahead and get this. I'll say failed login attempt. Let's copy that. Now make sure you note that the container name is image_server. So we're going to call this image_server, tab over and do keywords, do a regex, and we'll put in that phrase there. Now, the cool thing about the config file in here too is that you won't have to restart the container. I do like that. Once you just modify the config YAML file, it'll just update the settings inside of LoggiFly dynamically. So it's pretty awesome. Now you can do global keywords. Like if you wanted to have a global keyword for an error log, you could do that. I'm going to see if I can just go ahead and comment this out for the time being. Okay, let me see if I can take up LoggiFly. Let me cd over there. And let's do a docker compose up D. Okay, and we got a notification that these containers are being monitored. So that's pretty cool. In my app, let's go ahead and make sure we're subscribing. So we need to put in that topic, LoggiFly. Okay, let's go ahead and do subscribe. And we can see that right there, LoggiFly started. These containers are being monitored. Okay, so let's see what happens with a failed login attempt. Boom. Failed login attempt found in image server. Got the notification right on my phone. Failed login attempt for image. Yeah, right there. Pretty cool too, because it also shows me the IP address right there in the log. I like that. Now you can do a whole lot of other cool things, like change the template of the notification. The examples here inside of LoggiFly have great examples for different containers like Vault Warden, failed login, authentic and Authelia. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want me to go over various other different container logs, let me know. But otherwise, I think once you have this set up, you kind of understand what you need to do to get the notifications that you want from the containers that you're running. And this also just kind of gives you a little peace of mind of who is actually accessing your Docker containers and what is happening. Is there any, malicious behavior that's occurring? You'll get notifications right on your cell phone. So great service to set up. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. All right, guys.